Hello, I am that Rob Human, and today I'm showcasing a mod that I've created called Tiles, Tokens, and Boxes Oh My. The point of this mod is a bit of a bootstrap kit for rapid prototyping. If you're the kind of person who doesn't have 3D skills or don't want to bother with building your components out of 3D, this mod provides a couple kind of bare essentials of more advanced and nuanced components than what you might find in default. With that, let's dive into it. Each of the sections of the different kinds of components that I'm going to be covering will be outlined in the chapters in the YouTube timeline, assuming I'm judicious and diligent enough to remember to add them. But as the name implies, this mod covers tiles, tokens, boxes, as well as cards, but it didn't fit in with the title name. So to begin, let's actually import one into our own mod that I've set up. So this easy package is kind of my sandbox, so we'll edit that package. And I'm presuming that you've already subscribed to the mod in question, the Tiles, Tokens, and Boxes Oh My. So this should be in your mod list. So to add a token, or a tile, or a box, or a card from the Bootstrap kit, you're just going to hit Copy Object from Other Package. When you do that, I'm just going to select the set here. All the assets required will be copied over. So let's start with tiles. Tiles, as the name might suggest, are geometric tiles. When you click on it, you've got two different sets, imperial or metric. Imperial is all inches and metric is all millimeters. So let's actually use the 40 millimeter because why not? So if I come into tiles, you'll see that there are a variety of shapes that you can pull, and these are geometrically accurate enough. So 40 millimeter in this case means 40 millimeter diameter. In the case of the circle, it's literally the diameter. A couple of these you'll see are actually duplicated. So like, for example, the heptagon shows up twice. One is circumscribed, one is inscribed. Circumscribed means that the nominal measurement, the operative measurement, the 40 millimeters, is actually the heptagon's a bad example of this because of the way the math works. Let's go with the hexagon because that's a little bit easier to grok. I'm actually just going to copy this over and I'll keep talking about the operative measurement here. So I'm going to select it and copy it. And yeah, I know, it's because I did a previous take of this. So it yelled at me about the assets already existing. That's okay. So here's my 40 millimeter horizontal hexagon tile. And what makes it a tile is a couple different things. One being the operative measurement. In the case of the hexagon, and particularly the circumscribed hexagon, the operative measurement is edge to edge. So the span from the top edge to the bottom edge, actually I think this is the top edge and this is the bottom edge, is 40 millimeters. On the inscribed version, the operative measurement would be point to point. So the span from here to there would actually be 40 millimeters. This might be significant for how you stack your tiles or how you lay them out on the grid. So I've included all variations of that. In particular, if I go back into the tiles here for 40 millimeter, there's a horizontal version of a hexagon and a vertical version of a hexagon. Vertical just means that the points are oriented top to bottom. Horizontal means the points are oriented side to side, so that might be significant. The horizontal and hexagon version, or the horizontal and vertical versions, show up on the hexagon and octagon. So like here's your horizontal octagon, here's your vertical octagon. The inscribed and circumscribed show up on pretty much all the n-gons, except for the triangles, the square, and the diamond. I said triangles, right? Yeah. In the case of the triangles, the base is the nominal measurement. So like from corner to adjacent corner is 40 millimeters. again, that might be significant for any kind of tiling that you do. Figured I'd be explicit. Anyways, coming back to our template here. When you copy it over, the default texture will be the set of UV maps, and this is the default texture for this particular tile. So obviously, you've got your hexagon, which is the face, and then you've got the rim. Now you'll notice there's only one box here, and there's two boxes here. That's by design. And the reason for that is because there's actually two models here. There's the top and the bottom version. They're the same model, but they're in two different parts, so you can change them independently. This is useful if you want to have a front and back version of or obverse and reverse, to use technical terms, of the same token. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to reassign the texture on one of these, and this is the obverse, and I can scroll over here and pick the reverse side. So same texture shape, but two different textures. You can also split out material properties. So like if you want one to be red colored and the other one to be blue colored. See, you can do that. In this case, I don't actually want that, so we're just going to use the defaults. Another important thing about the tiles is that the colliders, and I'm not sure if this is going to show up on YouTube, are actually slightly smaller than the mesh. And the reason for this is because if you set up a grid, a snap grid in your session, if the collider were the exact same size as the tile, the edges actually interfere with each other when you go to tile them perfectly. So like if you have a 40 millimeter grid and you snap your 40 millimeter tiles onto it, they'll actually interfere with each other. So all the tiles have a slightly smaller collider to avoid that. So these will line up perfectly on a grid, just so you know. I'm going to save this. We'll come back. And let's move on to tokens. Tokens are much like tiles in that they're geometric shapes, again split up imperial and metric. In the case of tokens, however, and let's go with 25 millimeter, there's a couple more shapes here. You might see, for example, the cartouche, which isn't a tile. It is, however, available in the tokens, but there's also the familiar circle, diamond, hexagon, and all that. For the cartouche versions, the ones where they're not radially symmetrical, there's actually 4 different versions. There's a vertical version and a horizontal version, and they use slightly different UV layouts. And there's a 1x2, and 2x1 is the horizontal version of that, or a 2x3. So there's different aspect ratios if that's significant to you. Additionally, tokens do not have a circumscribed or inscribed version of that, and that is because in this case, 25 millimeters is not a discrete measurement on the geometry. Well, it is, but like it's not point to point or edge to edge like it is with tiles. The measurement on tokens is by surface area. So, for example, the 25 millimeter square is actually 25 millimeters by 25 millimeters, which gets you, 125 millimeters squared, right? If I've done the math right. All the other objects are of the same surface area. So this 25 millimeter Rayleigh triangle is actually 25 millimeters squared. 25 squared, 125? I'm not sure if you actually square the... It doesn't matter. They all have the same surface area. And the reason why I've done that is because it's actually visually more appealing. So if I were to actually copy over, say, I don't know, the square, and let's save that, and I'll copy over that Rayleigh triangle because I like how they look. Metric 25, Rayleigh triangle, copy, save, we'll come back out, set up a state real quick. Nope. So yeah, they're not the same size on either X or Y, but they have the same surface area, so they look visually similar in size. So I thought that was more important. Like I said, these are the shapes that, right, I have to come back out and copy them. These are the shapes that are available for all the different sizes. If there's a size that you don't see here that you want or need, give a shout and I will go ahead and add them. Going back to the surface area bit, I lied a little bit. All the ones that have the same aspect ratio, so like 1 to 1, have the same surface area, but like 1 to 2 actually has twice the surface area, and 2 to 3 actually has 1.5 times the surface area. So, and I can actually show that in this real quick. Just because it felt visually appropriate. The Rayleigh triangle, the square, and then the cartouche. You'll see that the cartouche is actually slightly bigger, but like it's the same size, quote unquote. Basically, tiles are specific measurements, tokens are a little looser and use surface area instead to be more visually consistent. That's the different utility of using those. So yeah, you can also use both tiles and tokens for like bases of standees if you want. That's an option too. See my tutorial on standees. The cardboard figures, I think it's actually called. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description on that so you can see how I use that. Moving on to the next set of assets here. These are cards. So I'm going to pull in poker in a second, but there's 5 different variants of cards. You've got your tarot cards, which I can't actually remember the measurement of, but don't worry, I got it on the texture. You'll see. Poker, which is your typical 2.5 by 3.5 inches card size, and then mini, which is vaguely half the size of a poker card, what have you. So if I go into poker, you've actually got 5 different versions. Cartouche, which is that shape that I like, that truncated circle. Chamfered, which is your Battlestar Galactica cut corners thing, if you're a fan of that show. Ducat, which is kind of like an elongated hexagon shape, but not really. And then your rounded corner and sharp corner, which is your archetypical thing. So I'm going to actually copy over the cartouche, and yes. And right on the texture, it actually like shows the specific measurements of the card. There's a little bit of bleed, and I want to talk about the bleed a little bit here. If I actually go into Photoshop and pull up this cartouche texture, which is what's actually driving the transparency of this, and I should mention that because it uses a shape image, all the restrictions of that apply. So like you can't flip and stack or mix decks of different shape images. So if that's important to you, this is not the method to do cards. So anyways, bleed. If you've seen my tutorial series, you'll know that one of the shortcomings of the card atlas, where you have a bunch of cards on the same texture, is if you don't have a border around them, like if they're actually to the edge, the art is to the edge, you can get slight bleed effects on the edge of all your textures, which might matter to you, it might not. It does to me personally, but I'm a little particular. So with that, what I've actually done is made it so that the card has a bit of a buffer or a bleed, a gutter around each corner. So like this art could fill the entire card, but only the area that's covered by this shape will actually show up as part of the card. That's one reason. The other reason is because the DPI is 128 pixels per inch. If you do the math, 2.5 by 3.5 would actually get you a 320 by 448 pixels. The way that video memory works is it prefers it if you have your textures laid out in a power of 2. The most efficient is both dimensions are a power of 2, so like 256 or 512 or 1024, which is probably why you see your texture sizes that size. The way that I've done this though is at 128 pixels per inch, 4 inches will actually get you 512. That's, 128 pixels times 4 inches tall, 512. I did say the most efficient way is to have your textures be a power of 2 by a power of 2. However, slightly less efficient, though not necessarily a reduction in quality, is if your biggest dimension is a power of 2. So in this case, the height of a poker card texture is a power of 2, 512 in this case. And it's okay that the width is less than that and not a power of 2. So that's why I've done that. It's a solid round number, binarily speaking, on the DPI, and it has a built-in gutter, so you can have textures that actually go to the edge and beyond the edge, and it won't have bleed from one card to the next. Moving on, I'm actually going to pull in the tarot cards here, and I'm going to explain the difference between the low fidelity and the high fidelity. We'll start with the low fidelity. The low fidelity card, and I'll pull in Champered this time, you'll see it has a DPI of roughly 97 pixels per inch, and that's because I basically shrunk the texture down so that the height is a power of 2 again. Of course, this compresses the texture. So if you want a high efficiency, or a highly efficient, memorily speaking, texture, use the low fidelity. It's slightly less DPI, but it won't take up as much room in your video memory. If I go back to the high fidelity version, high fidelity, and this time I'll use Ducket so you can see that shape. You'll see it's slightly hexagon. You'll see that we're back to that 128 pixels per inch. So it's got the same what's called texel density, where the card is 2 3/4 by 4 3/4, and the texture takes up the same amount of size per inch. So it's a little bit more consistent. And personally, this makes it easier for when I'm rendering out the art for the cards. The only drawback to this is the texture is no longer a power of 2. So this will actually take up more video memory than it otherwise would if it were a power of 2. The way that works, by the way, is it actually expands to the next power of 2. So this texture will actually take up 1012 by 10, or 1024 by 1024. It's not very memory efficient. However, if that is not as much a concern for you, then go for it. Basically, high fidelity is less memory efficient but better texture quality, whereas low fidelity is slightly lower texture quality but more memory efficient. I leave it to you to decide which one you need. The only other thing I'll mention here is that when you go to start building your card atlases, so like, if you have 4 cards in your deck, you might do a 2x2 grid of cards in your texture atlas. Again, see the card tutorial, and I'll put a link in the description again if I remember. Your best bet, the most memory efficient way to do that, again, is to make it so that your textures are a power of 2 by a power of 2. 512 by 512, 1024 by 1024. A slightly less efficient version of that is if you have your longest dimension be a power of 2. So like in the case of this, again, the texture height of this is 1024, but the width is less than that. So if I were to take a texture and I needed 2 cards, what I might actually do is stack the card 2 vertically and only 1 horizontally, even though the impulse might be to put 2 side by side vertically or horizontally, so like A next to B instead of A on top of B. The drawback of that is if you make it wider than it is tall, and your wider dimension is not a power of 2, then it's less memory efficient. And the way that these card textures are laid out, the height, at least for the poker and the low fidelity versions, the height is already a power of 2. So it's more efficient to actually stack them vertically, or at least in a way where it is always taller than it is wider. You might get lucky though, depending on your layout. You might end up with a power of 2 if you go widthwise, but be careful of that. It's just something that you might want to think about. At the end of the day though, it probably won't impact you that much unless you've got a lot of cards on a single atlas or a bunch of different atlases. If that's not likely the case, or you don't notice any kind of slowdown about it, just use the high fidelity one. It's easier, it's simpler. There's that. Okay, moving on. Next up, oh, went too far. Next up are the boxes. The boxes are a bit of a gimmick, but basically I included these in case you want to actually add a chest or a container that has your game art, your game box art on it. I've included a slew of different sizes here. So like, for example, I'm gonna scroll this down. You've got your tuck boxes, so like they hold a deck of cards. You've also got your deck box, which is like that long sleeve that carries like 300 or 400 cards. So you've got that in vertically or horizontally, like as though the cards were laying on their side. You've also got some miniature boxes, which are about the size of a gaming miniature, roughly. So if you want to have like little blister packs, you can do that, and you can put your art on it. And you've also got your game box. So like in the case of Letter, this is actually slightly bigger than 8.5 by 11 inches, and they come in 5 different heights. So like Letter, this is the regular one that's in the middle. You got your slim version, which is really tiny or really short. The short version, which is slightly taller. The regular, the tall, which is taller than the regular, and then the mega, which is just like really thick. They come in trade, which is ostensibly 5.5 by 8, I think. I can't remember. It's the size of a trade book. I went for the US paper sizes. If people are really interested, I could also do like A4 instead. I don't use metric paper, so I don't know that quite as well. Anyways, those are the different sizes of game box art that that I've included here. Tabloid is 11 by 17. Letter is 8.5 by 11. Yeah, so it's a bit of a gimmick, but like I actually think it's kind of neat if you want to include your game box in your mod. And additionally, in particular, the deck boxes or the tuck boxes are really useful if you want to have less clutter on your game table. So like you could have different game boxes spread out over your table that serve different purposes. And if you're so inclined to have art that is thematically appropriate for your game for these different containers, here's a surefire way to do that. Again, and this is the mini template that is really small. All the UVs are laid out in the same kind of way, and they get copied over into your assets directory when you copy it from the mod. So that's, like I said, a little gimmicky, but like you'd be surprised at how much that actually kind of amps up the quality of your mod, even if it doesn't serve a direct purpose. It can also just be a nice visual for your thumbnail on mod.io. So that's a route for you. I will be renaming those, by the way, so that they're a little bit more, they're sorted better. I don't like this sorting method, so watch out for that. Anyways, that's my little Bootstrap mod. I hope it serves you well. If there ends up being a card shape or a box size or a tile shape that is not here that you want, drop by the Tabletop Playground Discord and let me know what size you want or what shape you want, and I might just add it to the mod so that everyone can benefit. So yeah, happy making!